Welcome to the Art of Procurement podcast with your host, Philip Eidson. Here, thought leaders share the trends, strategies, and tactics that you can use to elevate the role of procurement and your career.
Hi there, everybody, and welcome to today's Art of Procurement Friday show. And if you are here in the US, I trust that you had a nice Thanksgiving Day. Thanks to commercialization, I think the focus is already turning to Black Friday and the rush to buy as much stuff as possible, as cheap as possible. That all kicks off today. And when I moved to the US, I did actually try and take part in a couple of Black Fridays, but Detroit and Black Friday, to me just mean freezing cold weather. So after a couple of years, I figured best stay indoors and I'll buy everything online instead. So that's pretty much the approach that I'll be taking to this weekend. But with it being a holiday weekend here in the States, what I thought I would do is share with you one of my favorite submissions from the Procurement Revolution event, which took place back in late September. And more, I really believe that mindset is a key enabler, or it can even be a roadblock in our efforts to really think differently and elevate the procurement value proposition. And without that change in mindset, it makes a lot of the other things that we talk about as being, entirely necessary, such as competency development, almost irrelevant. And so I wanted to focus today on the topic of mindset. In fact, I think that's so important that when we did the Procurement Revolution, we dedicated an entire day of content to it. And today's piece was one that I just really enjoyed from the session. And it comes from Elisabeth Lawrence. Elisabeth is a long-time procurement executive, and actually just after we recorded the piece that I'm going to share today, she joined a materials company to set up their category management center of excellence, actually moved over to Europe to do that. And so you're going to hear Elisabeth talk about the need to shift mindsets if we are to take procurement to the next level. So I hope that you enjoy the show. I hope that you have a great Thanksgiving weekend if you're here listening in the States. And I'll be back on Tuesday with another interview show. Okay, let's go ahead and roll the tape.
Hi, my name is Elisabeth Lawrence. I've been in the procurement industry for, I think, 25 plus years. I've been on the direct as well as on the indirect side the last 10 years. I built several procurement organizations in the indirect space, and prior to that, I was on the direct side. I come from the clothing business a couple of years ago in supply chain, so I grew up very granular on both sides with the plan, make, source, deliver kind of background and upbringing. So thanks for the opportunity, Philip. I really appreciate it. So what I really wanted to talk about is a little bit different. A lot of what we talk about is always about content, and content is incredibly important. I completely agree. I think all of us procurement leaders should be innovators and should be aware of content and constantly learn. What do they say? Lifelong learning, right, is really what's aspirational for us. And to me, that's incredibly important. But to me, what it comes down to when I keep realizing and I meet a lot of people that I come across is I find the biggest challenge we have is our own mindset. So in all of this, I wanted to talk a little bit about that. It's skill set compounded with mindset, and mindset is really what's underneath all of this. So let's talk a little bit about what's happening right now in procurement. So in procurement, how many times have we shaken the tree, right? We have the compounding facts on the difficult side of procurement, and we have the compounding facts on the enabling side of procurement. And when we look at these together, we are dealing with a multitude of things right now in procurement that are really unprecedented. The complexities that we're experiencing today in this industry are really immense, and it's as I said, a constant learning for us. And I think enabled through all of this, our mindset needs to evolve. So how many times have you really shaken the tree? How many times can you really cut cost, right? How many times have we gone back to this supplier or the other, the processes? We've looked at all different angles. It almost feels like, the animal that keeps turning over the rock and keeps trying to figure out how to process it. There's only so much you can do, right? The speed things are going to market, the fact that some of our categories are turning into commodities, the cost of change these days has shifted dramatically, which is really a new way we're looking at things. The fact that we have a CFO now running our organization in many cases has shifted our outlook. Logistics, the labor market with outsourcing, offshoring, things of that nature. There's a lot of the legacy things we're still dealing with and inheriting, as well as overarching the globalization that is happening these days more than ever, is really compounding our industry as a whole. And what's good about it, though, on the other side, is we have immense data coming our way. Fantastic, probably more than we've ever been able to get a hold of. And that's really our superpower. We're able to go to these people and say to these stakeholders for the first time, really at a granular level, hopefully if we have the right technologies in place, and that's a whole separate subject for another time, is we actually can show you what the relevance is in your category. The fact that our operating models as a whole are shifting, to me, and I've talked about this in separate sessions, but I find it incredibly important and interesting to talk about how operating models are shifting, right? How we have talked initially about strategic sourcing being at the front of what we do. And to me, that's the biggest bubble that is expanding and expanding and expanding. In the middle is that category management that is become more commoditized in many cases, but also is becoming a deep specialization. And I'm actually involved right now in building a global center of excellence for category management as a service, potentially, maybe even. So it's a very exciting time for category management where that is leading. And those, to me, are all things that will require that mindset, that shift of that mindset. And on the back end, yes, that's the old mindset, which is operational tactical that we've all had. People are just buying smarter as a whole. You yourself as an individual consumer is buying more intelligently. Your own family is. Things are becoming more simplified. And in many cases, so when I talk about simplified, it's a matter of we are trying to really evolve and bring it down to what's the most important. And then there's some other compounding factors which are actually interesting in the technologies that are out there. Of course, artificial intelligence, much talked about, that we don't know yet where it's going to go specifically and where it's going to lead us. But obviously, if we just think about it, it's going to give us a lot of opportunity to generate more intelligence than we've ever had before. And in many cases, yes, it will replace a lot of what we do today. So all the more reason to change our mindset and change our outlook. Blockchain being another one of those. So what does that mindset really look like? To me, my favorite line is really a matter of my favorite theory behind this is, to me, procurement is really not a function. To me, procurement is really, truly a fully integrated team of people that needs to collaborate on a deep level with these other functional areas. We don't want to go the way that finance and legal and a lot of these categories functional areas have gone. To me, I think they provide a service, and I think that's a great thing. But I think that procurement really provides a very different mindset, and we have to bring a different mindset and not be pigeonholed into those same functional areas. You're just one of many here at the table. And just be that. To me, there's a lot more we have to offer. So in the past, right, we were the person who pounded compliance, and we were the one who got the 3 bids, and how many, all the reporting that we did, and how many approvals can you possibly still get, and what's your approval routing, and we had the process down to a science, and we had all the documents possible that you had to fill out, and hopefully we're getting away from that more. And we had the perfect procurement policy now, in the meantime, even a global policy. To me, I think that's really what I like when I listen to people. In some cases, many people have been in the business for a very long time. Just recently, I was at Procurement Leaders, and I was out there at the event and speaking, and Greg Brandenberry went on stage. And, to me, he was just brilliant in what he summed up. He said, I've been around doing this for a very long time. And if there's anything I had to say out of all of this, it's simplify what you're doing. And to me, that's really where the mindset comes in. Everything you do, you need to filter through innovating and simplifying. And we need to become those people instead of the people that are really the blockers, as we used to be in the past, perceived as. And that's really a seismic shift. That's a shift of these tectonic, the tectonic plates where the dinosaurs, became extinct. This is the juncture. And we've been talking about this for a long time, but this is the juncture where I believe is really starting to finally happen. And I'm very excited about it. I think it's a great thing. In fact, we've talked about the fact in some ways, because we're talking about extinction, in some ways, if we really do a great job at who we are, we should become extinct. Because in some ways, if our entire theory is to train the business on doing a better job on all of the procurement mindset that they should be doing in their due diligence and in their processes and in their thought and in their value creation, if we're really teaching them that, in some ways, if they absorb that mindset, which, is at times still debatable if that's, really going to happen in some cases fully to that full extent. We've had our challenges sometimes. I think we might actually talk ourselves out of that aspect of our position and become solely strategic and become that innovator and that identifier, as many people are calling it, that identifier of opportunities enabled by that reporting and truly generating that value and the problem solving. I like one other thing that, I just recently, and many of you have read some of the recent books that have come out. I've ferociously been reading some of these, all sorts of interesting junctures we're dealing with, right? And Gerard Chick talked about something, and I wanted to quote him here. What I like the way he summed up the skill sets. And if you have a chance, really take a look at this. It's called The Evolution of Procurement. And he talks about the fact how knowledge is really the fundamental. And I don't want to he can talk about this much better, but I like the way the fundamentals are the knowledge. Yes, we talked about that. That's the content. But to me, then the content, he talks about the competencies and the intellect. He talks about creativity, communication, collaboration, empathy, right? Structured, to be critically thinking, problem solving. Those are all the new skill sets. And to me, that's that mindset that we need to absorb and need to reach to next. And it requires a certain personality he talks about here. And I think to me, this sums it really up very well. It's a matter of curiosity, initiative, resilience, adaptability, leadership, social and cultural awareness. And Philip and I were talking a minute ago about the fact how, and I'm over here in Europe right now, I just recently relocated of having worked in the US market for 20 years of my life. And over here, it's really interesting to see that we need to become this global mindset. And we need to it's really going to be a deal breaker for all of us in procurement. And I'm very excited about being at this juncture with everyone together and kicking that door open. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to another episode of The Art of Procurement. To find an archive of all past episodes, you can go to artofprocurement.com/episodes. And to ensure you never miss another show, go to artofprocurement.com/subscribe.